Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Justin Jones, Senate District 9, for the record. I appreciate the opportunity to address you regarding Senate Bill 221, a bill addressing the important issue of ensuring that firearms do not end up in the hands of those with mental illness who are a danger to themselves or to others. I didn't set out to take on this issue when I sought this office, but Sandy Hook changed things for me, as it did for so many others. I'm a father first and was deeply disturbed that someone with mental health issues had such easy access to firearms and could carry out such carnage on innocent children. Sitting in church the Sunday after Sandy Hook, I had moms and dads, grandfathers and grandmothers, many gun owners themselves, come up to me and say, "Justin, what are you going to do to make sure that guns don't fall into the wrong hands?" I do not take my charge to represent my constituents lightly, and that is why I have spent what some would consider an inordinate amount of time studying these issues, talking to mental health professionals and law enforcement officers, visiting facilities, and poring over statutes and proposed legislation from other states. As you will recall, as a committee, we heard from a broad group of professionals a few weeks ago on these issues, which helped shape my proposed legislation. Through the process, I have carried on a dialogue with individual gun owners and with representatives from the NRA. In fact, one of the key parts of my proposed legislation, included in the amendment, the duty to warn provision, was at the suggestion of the NRA. After Sandy Hook, New York State rushed to pass legislation that was criticized by many, including mental health professionals. I have endeavored to be deliberative in the process of crafting this legislation so that we get it right. As a result of the continuing discussions I have had with mental health professionals, law enforcement, and the NRA, I have submitted an amendment which I believe addresses many of the concerns that have been raised with the original draft. And with that, I will go through the key provisions of the bill. You should have before you my amendment, which makes some changes, which I'll go over here today.
Senator,
Yes.
why don't we pause just a minute and see if any committee members have questions for Ms. Chernowski before we move on? Anybody? Okay, go ahead then. Thank you.
Thank you. First, Senate Bill 221 requires faster reporting of mental health adjudications by the courts to the Central Repository and the FBI NICS database. One thing that shocked me, and I think shocked other members of this committee from our presentation a few weeks ago, was the revelation from Judge Voy that the courts have no statutory timeline for reporting involuntary commitments and other mental health prohibitors to the Central Repository, and that in practice this information was being reported 45 days or more after adjudication. SB 221 corrects this grave error by requiring that courts report such information to the Central Repository within 5 days. Second, Senate Bill 221 directs the Department of Health and Human Services to expand their collaboration efforts with mental health professionals, law enforcement, local governments, and others to ensure those with mental illness don't fall through the cracks. We heard a few minutes ago from Dr. McEllistrom how successful such collaboration efforts can be in better serving the mentally ill in our community. Third, with the amendment, Senate Bill 221 establishes a duty for mental health professionals to report to the police and warn a potential victim when a patient expresses a specific intent to harm or kill another person. Nevada is one of only 4 states in the nation with no duty to warn. It is time to protect potential victims. And finally, Senate Bill 221 requires background checks for all gun purchasers. Current law requires a background check which includes mental health prohibitors such as involuntary commitment for all gun purchases. In looking at this issue, talking again to law enforcement and mental health professionals, I came to the conclusion that you can't effectively keep guns out of the hands of those who may be a danger to others without background checks for all sales. A purchaser will not be required to do anything more than they would if they went to a licensed gun shop to purchase a gun. According to the Central Repository, through which background checks in Nevada are routed, they are able to complete a background check in a matter of 1 to 2 minutes in 98% of the cases. The process is less consuming and less invasive than going through security at the airport. Background checks work. Since implementation in 1998, more than 1 million people nationwide have been denied guns because they were prohibited by law from owning a firearm. That's felons, fugitives from justice, and those adjudicated mentally ill. In Nevada, just in the year 2012, nearly 2,000 people were denied gun purchases as a result of background checks. And even with our slow and spotty mental health reporting in Nevada, more than 1,000 people have been denied guns because of mental health prohibitors since the inception of background checks in Nevada. Before closing, I want to emphasize that the purpose of this bill is not to stigmatize those suffering from mental illness, nor to discourage them from seeking treatment. As I have previously revealed, I have close family members who have struggled with clinical depression, bipolar disorder, and suicidal ideations. Those with mental illness are, unfortunately, far more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of violence. I have tried my best to balance the rights of the mentally ill and the rights of law-abiding gun owners with the rights of those parents who approached me in the hall at church and asked what I would do to protect their children from the next tragedy. I do not pretend to have all the answers to this very difficult subject, nor will I pretend that if passed, my bill will stop all mentally ill individuals who are determined to be a danger to others from gaining access to guns. But I could not look those concerned parents in the eye if I stood idly by and did nothing. I look forward to working with other legislators, including members of this committee, to ensure that we are doing all we can to protect children and keep guns out of the wrong hands. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.